So hi and welcome to the first episode of Beyond the Binary Beats. I've got my first guest here who is Duncan, and he is our first guest who is a guitarist in Declan, Welsh and the Decadent West, and the DJ of Queer History of Dance Music. Do you just want to give yourself a little introduction?
Hi, so I think covered most of the bases there. My name's Duncan McBride. I am a guitarist, multi-instrumentalist, songwriter, producer, DJ, all the creative musical things that look good on an Instagram profile, but I can't really explain to my parents what I do for work very well. So what are they?
Amazing. I love the word multi-instrumentalist. I wish I could say that about myself, to be honest.
One I'm good at, and then about 14 that I'm so average at, but still music, innit?
So the reason we're here today is we're having a conversation about queer representation in the Scottish music industry, and I thought that Duncan would be a really good example of that. Do you just want to maybe touch on how you identify and where that kind of sits you in the music industry?
Yeah, so I identify as pansexual, non-binary, use he, they pronouns generally, mostly he, kind of quite fluid in all these sorts of regards. So yeah, I didn't know I'd have to put a very specific label on myself today. It's quite, I mean, based on what I've already said, probably harder to define than most. But yeah, it's kind of how I choose, like how I guess I identify. So yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I can absolutely remove that if you don't want to hear that.
I literally don't mind.
Fine.
Cut it down so it looks like it was articulate, basically. That's the goal.
I think it's
podcast.
I mean, I'm going to ask every guest that comes on, obviously, to kind of, as much as like as a community, we don't really like to be defined by things. I think it's important for the conversation that we kind of make people aware who's maybe listening at home or whatever, like how the guest identifies and where they kind of fit into that space, you know. So we're not just having the same type of person on speaking about the same thing. It just will work like that, you know. We've got to show that we're being representative of the full community. Yeah. So first of all, I think I'd just quite like to delve into maybe asking questions about what queer representation, what representation meant to you from a younger age. Was there anybody in music that you looked up to that was like queer identifying, that maybe inspires you to get into the band, or has inspired you? Obviously with Queer History of Dance Music, that is about like the queer history of dance music, do you know what I mean? So there'll be a multitude of people that's inspired you for that, for the DJ side of things, but I want to kind of touch on the band side of things.
It's an interesting question. I think the first queer musician I was aware of, was when Will Young won Pop Idol, and then
Will Young.
I remember him being like, I don't know if he's an inspiration, but I remember him coming out, I think either 2 days after he'd won Pop Idol, being all over the front page of everything, like The Sun, all the kind of tabloids in the UK, and it was very much like, I guess, I mean, it was framed in quite a negative way at the time, I remember, but that may be my first exposure, I guess, to like queerness in music. But I think when I was quite young, it probably wasn't something that I had a very direct understanding of. But I think one of my favourite bands when I was growing up was Nirvana, and I think Kurt Cobain, as I've gotten older, I've kind of realised, I mean, maybe it's controversial and undefined, but like he's definitely someone who you can see elements of like gender fluidity in a lot of the ways, I guess, you know, even just like, you know, they used to wear dresses on stage, or they would even just, I guess, you know, he definitely had a much more sensitive side to him, which was, I guess, very different from what was going on in the 90s and the late 80s at the time in terms of music. But other than that, really, I think my biggest inspirations in music were always, or what got me into music, and especially the friends that I have that I make music with, it was kind of, I guess, just like left-wing socialist politics generally. Like, when the band first started, it was like, it still is to an extent a big part of what we do is political, but when we started out, it was all very much like a much more overt part of what we were doing. You know, songs like, we had a song called No Pasaran, which was basically, you know, a Spanish Civil War song. And various, like a few other tracks in that kind of similar ilk, which were like overtly political. And I guess like when I went to uni, and when I started reading not just like, I guess, not just like Marxist feminist stuff, but like queer theory as well. I always saw that as being very connected. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of a big part of what drew me to the people that I make music with in particular was, I guess, that all-encompassing politics. In terms of as I've gotten older and kind of allowed myself more leeway to, like, I guess, listen to queer artists in general, I'd say Freddie Mercury's definitely still up there as one of the biggest inspirations. Especially when I feel the urge to grow a mustache, he's definitely an inspiration there. So other than that, and I guess, as you've touched on, there's a million, I guess, dance, DJ, electronic artists that touch on that area. So I think Queen were definitely a big band even when I was younger, but maybe, as I said, with Kurt Cobain, maybe it wasn't a direct acknowledgement of that was what drew me to them. It might not have been the queerness, but maybe on a subconscious level that was part of it.
Mm-hmm. And I think obviously there's like maybe an argument there to understand why Kurt was quite a troubled person. Maybe that was reflective of what you're speaking about there, you know. You've got to maybe ponder that thought a wee bit, but you don't want to say nothing.
I'll let Twitter have that conversation. But if you can go down a rabbit hole of Kurt Cobain in that area, and I couldn't say anything about it. Honestly.
I've never thought about it, but like that. But I can kind of see it.
We'll talk off here. We'll talk off mic.
But so obviously, then I would quite like to touch on like queer history of dance music. Obviously, for it, again, arguably, you would probably could say that queer people sort of defined dance music in a way, you know, like we definitely developed it as a genre to the point where it is now. I think where did your inspiration come to pursue that a bit? Is it from your master's degree? Is that where that came from, or was it like part of studies?
It coincided very well with my master's. So I did a lit in music industries at Glasgow Uni, which has like its underpinning in like commercial music, but also in our first semester we spent a lot of time studying like the history of popular music and popular music theory generally. So I guess anything to do with, you know, genres and scenes and how they're formed by identity and how music and identity are linked was always influential in that. And just history kind of in general, anything of like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s was, I think, in terms of what I still listen to now and find the most inspiration in. It does tend to be going back, funnily enough, but it was kind of a coincidence almost, because when me and Amy, who I do the show with, they came to me essentially with the idea, all like pretty much fully formed, of, you know, I think in like 2018 and kind of that time, like a lot of dance music culture had become very homogenous and kind of in many ways had moved away from its queer roots. Kind of, I guess, like as a result of, I guess, you know, a culture or a scene or a style becoming mainstream, you find that it kind of loses the radical aspect of it. And I think for Amy and for me, when, you know, I had the idea, which is very much, you know, a lot of people maybe are coming to this music without the understanding of where it came from, you know, the underground scenes that were queer, but also, you know, non-white as well, a fundamental part of what like made dance music what it is today. So we kind of were like, let's focus on specific areas of history and like talk about the history of gay LGBT rights in that period, but also have the music, the soundtrack that went along with it, because the things are so intrinsically connected. Like, I mean, Stonewall in itself was, you know, was you know, fundamentally a place that played music, and the music that was played there would go on to define and inspire, but also to define what disco would become. You know, you had everything from like funk, soul, lots of Latin music with the percussion, you know, and even like psychedelic rock and, you know, show tunes that came basically like to make a genre of music that dominated the 70s and still has a lasting impact on dance music today. So I think that was kind of, I guess, I mean, in the way that like disco is, you still hear that at every big dance music festival played regularly, is I guess like the connection that we wanted to make with the show was that this comes from a very radical place, and in many ways it's kind of come, in some places, gone quite far away from that. But I suppose, you know, any event that's sponsored by a bank and a brewery is going to be homogenized. And I'm just going at the capitalist again, sorry.
So I think as well, like, when I remember when it kind of first started, like you really started going with queer history of dance music, and like you were doing like sessions in like Clyde Built Radio and stuff like that. I remember listening, and you had like wee speaking snippets and stuff in between that where you'd be presenting, but also like you would be DJing as well, like music. And I thought that was quite a good way that you introduced like the educational side to it, and why you were playing that type of music, and where that specific genre had come from, you know. And I thought that was really, really brilliant. I think it was quite an important thing for the community, do you know what I mean, to hear. I thought that was really, really good. So with Queer History of Dance Music, you are the DJ for that, and do you have residencies in?
So we
do
do book club every
book club,
Thursday. We still do the Clyde Built Radio show. The problem with doing a history show in a linear fashion is that you start at one period and eventually you get to the end of it. So the show's now been going since 2018. Before we were on Clyde Built Radio, we were on Subcity in the Glasgow Uni affiliated one. So that was actually, interestingly, we've done quite a lot of history ones on Clyde Built Radio. But most of our back catalogue of kind of chronological historical shows is Subcity. Which I don't think they're available online at the moment. I think the archive kind of needs to be re-updated. So if you're looking to find us, you can get us on SoundCloud, where we have I spent a couple hours not too long ago putting everything into neatly defined categories, because as well as the interviews, and we've done some shows that have just been kind of mixed shows where we just come in and just chat whatever nonsense we've been thinking about that day, but also we've done a lot of interviews as well. Loads of kind of people in Glasgow, like Talia, Shoot Your Shot, we've had on Plantain Chips, we did Optimo, Keith from Optimo, Miss Cosmics. We've also done two of our favourite DJs in 2021. We went to We Out Here Festival, and DJ Paulette and Colleen Cosmo Murphy, who are both very much in that kind of Brownswood, I guess, Giles Peterson orbited sort of, I guess, like UK and like worldwide, I guess, like new alternative jazz scene, where it's kind of exploring how jazz influenced dance music, which I guess is something that me and Amy are really interested in as well. Because although I would never define myself as like a jazz head or someone who's particularly knowledgeable in that area, it's something that I find so interesting, especially when you go into like the cosmic side of things. But we've, as I say, interviewed people kind of all over, and it's kind of, we will go back and do a history one now and again, but it's very much like, it's a fluid, although it's Queer History of Dance Music, which is a history show, it's a very fluid premise in many ways, because we've literally, I think we did a show which we called The Queer History of Straight Pop, which was basically just like a load of like how, just kind of discussion of how like, I guess like straight pop acts, like particularly female pop acts, have been like so like popular within like the gay community, the gay or the LGBT community specifically, which I guess was like, we're not exactly sure what the history was, and there was a lot of speculation, but definitely the concepts are always a little bit fluid, which I guess is in fitting with the theme, to be honest. Yep.
So you also do stuff at Bonjour as well. I think that's obviously, for people that don't know what Bonjour is, it's a queer space on the Salt Market in Glasgow. Quite an important space, I think, for the community as well. Lots of different acts and lots of different nights come through there. That are, I'm pretty sure I'm right when I say this, is all LGBT that perform in there.
Yeah,
so it's a full LGBT kind of like centre of performing arts space,
definitely,
isn't it?
So it works.
Is it a co-op or something?
It's a co-op, yeah. Co-op, so it kind of works in a really, I guess, going to my radical politics, it has a really fully decentralised operation, like very, very much, everyone paid the same wage, everyone kind of within the co-op, I guess no one's above each other, and it's all very much like, it's all about collaboration and like giving like a space for, it is like, as you say, a queer space, primarily, I guess, focused on like giving voices and space to marginalised people who don't usually get opportunities, which is, I guess, to have that business model and also that ethos is like a big part of what I guess drew us to doing stuff there. So our first party there, which called Body to Body, was in it was in March because it's April now. It was the 3rd of March, and it was really busy, great success. We had Halal Kitty, who plays with Mox Jama, and then we had David Barbarossa, who's one of our favourite DJs as well. David, we booked him previously for, so myself, less involved, but Amy, who I do the Queer State of Dance music with, also runs a sober party called Good Clean Fun, which operates out of, or is usually put on in Garnet Hill Community Centre, but we've also done a party in the refugee headquarters rooftop terrace, which is amazing, on Blythewood Square. We did that last summer, plan to do one of them soon, but I say that's kind of more Amy's thing specifically. I'll kind of help out whatever there, but yeah, we had David for the first one of them, and I'm always impressed by DJs that play all vinyl, even though, you know, the format is only one part of what you do. You know, selection, curation of a set is all, I guess, in many ways more important, or as important, but I'm still always so impressed by someone who can do that. But yeah, our first Bonjour party, great. Looking to the future, we kind of have, I guess, in discussions to get more stuff going there, but yeah, as you say, it is in many ways crucial for the community to have these kind of spaces, because I guess I guess with COVID in particular, loads of great bars and venues in Glasgow have been struggling, even if they've not closed down. You know, they've reduced their opening hours, or, you know, I guess had to cut back in so many different aspects of it. So yeah, to have good spaces with a good ethos in Glasgow is really, really crucial.
That was a worry about Bonjour as well. I think I remember there was a big kind of outcry for them as well, just about how they were really worried about like finances and how it was going to continue to run and stuff like that. And I think that was a really scary period for the queer community, just because it's very much, if you don't know what the Bonjour is, or if you've not been to Bonjour, you should definitely go. It's really fun, but it's a space where that isn't touched by the same kind of vibe as, say, places like Polo, that's more commercialised, like that's more like your kind of straight edge queer facilities. This is more like, it's performance art, it's more down and dirty, like it's really like what you want to see when you go a night out. It's more an experience than anything else. It's not just a club night, it's like a club experience, I think. I was there just a couple of weeks ago. I seen Joseph at the Barrowlands, so I did a really, really good gig. Another queer person that's absolutely killing it for the community, do you know what I mean? So we went there after that, and it was a night it was on. It was really, really good. It was like multiple performances, multiple drag performances, and more just performance art and stuff. And I think like for yourself, it's putting on nights like that. It's just really important that we have these spaces that we can go to that isn't the same, that isn't the Polo Lounge.
Totally.
You know?
They also have a cage in there, which is
I
funny.
seen that. It wasn't there the last time I was there though.
It's the new hot thing.
What happened? Do people dance in it? Is that what it is?
We got a photo in it, but it was a bit silly. We were all just like, "Help, get me out the cage." But yeah, the thing I also love about Bonjour is the fact that like you can go walk around the entire room and you can see the personalities of the people that like work there and run it on every single aspect of it, every little bit of detail, like even just to like, you know, the newspaper clippings that are like stuck on the wall in the bathroom or anything like that. Like it all kind of shines through that people give a shit, or care. People care about the venue. So yeah, and also, you know, DIY is best.
So obviously that is a queer space, right? And like, it's kind of obvious that queer people will come to that space to see like queer hysteria dance music, things like that. So how does that correlate to somewhere like Hillhead Book Club? What kind of audience do you see there? Is it queer people that come to that, or is it like a kind of more a mix?
We've had a mix, really, to be honest.
Because that's not a queer venue. It's not.
No, very much just a student bar, basically. And like we do, as we've done.
It's very nice, isn't it though?
It's a great room. Lovely old historic building. I spent a lot of time on Google finding old photos of what it used to look like when it was a cinema in 1912 and all this and all that. So
it was a cinema, I didn't know that.
It was a cinema, and then it was
kind of see that.
It was a cinema, and then it was an auditorium, and then it became a restaurant in the 90s, and then I think in like the late aughts, whatever you call them, the late before the 2010s.
Yeah.
It got bought out by the current owner, and they made it into like a restaurant bar type space. But yeah, we play there every week, but we've done many other bars in Glasgow, places like CCA, Sleazy's, can't think of any more off the top of my head, but not Rumshack, but many other places in Glasgow. And like, I think both of us really enjoy playing those bar sets because it gives you a chance to kind of try out new things in front of people and on a bigger sound system, but it's also just, you know, especially with Book Club, like they've given us a lot of reign to kind of do what we want in there. So we have kind of, you know, taken time to say, you know, tonight we're going to do like a Grace Jones special and just play Grace Jones songs, which if you love Grace Jones is great. If you don't, you might not be a big fan, but we're in charge of the music, so you listen to what we tell you to listen to, which is, I think, the most important.
Requests, no.
It's the most important thing about being a DJ is that no one can tell you what to do because you're the one that's being paid to be there. It's my job.
Yeah.
I mean, requests is an interesting topic because sometimes it all depends about how they're asked and if you have them. Because I think most people realise that if you don't have a song, because most people realise that you're not actually DJing from the internet and you can't just play any song in the world. And chances are, if it's someone in a bar and not someone who's been paid to do a wedding, for example, you'll have a limited pool of music, and it'll all be very much in keeping with what you're currently playing at that time. So if I'm playing disco and somebody comes up and requests, I don't know, I don't want to name any specific artist that I hate because that would be very
Yeah, if somebody come up...
Actually, no, I'm kidding. The most common request I get is ABBA. I mean, I love ABBA, but I probably only have like 3 songs in my USB, and you get some very intense people who will request ABBA and then stare at you until you play it and keep coming up and people asking you to play it again. ABBA, it's like a cult in Glasgow in a good way.
I'm definitely part of that.
I love it. No, I mean, I absolutely love ABBA, and like unites everyone from like the youngest like queer person right up to like the wee baldy dad with glasses who's like drinking John Smith. Like everyone loves ABBA, so you can't really you can't really be fine. But it is the most common request, except for when Stranger Things came out and I got Kate Bush constantly. There's one song, but I have loads of other Kate Bush
to play at a night out though, innit? Like unless it's like a remixed version or something like that.
I don't really mind
dance
it.
To Kate Bush, you know.
I like it. I've always been a big fan of DJs that play a curveball at the end.
Right. Okay.
With Hill Book Club, because it's a bar, it doesn't really have the same like set the room, build it up, peak time down. Like it doesn't really have that same feeling. You're kind of just reading the room and playing what seems appropriate. But yeah, when you're playing a club, I'm always a big fan of going with an absolute curveball at the end.
Yeah.
So if I'm playing, I might do Hounds of Love by Kate Bush at the end because I think that's a great song. But yeah, Run Out the House, not one.
See, you're saying that, and actually, when I think about that, like I used to be like the biggest sub club goer and like spent my entire. I was there like 7 days a week. It was actually ridiculous, but. I remember I went to this night and it was like, I can't remember what the theme was, like, because you can never really remember a night at Subway, do you know what I mean? So, but I do remember that it was like, I think it was like really techno based, and it was like pots and pans. You couldn't, it was just noise, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
pots and pans, I like that
pots
one.
And pans,
I like that.
People two-stepping for 10 hours, like it was not 10, but like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they threw in a Sugar Babes song at the very, very end.
Fantastic.
And I can't remember what one it was, but they threw it in at the very end, and everybody just like erupted because of it. And it was like people were punching that roof bit, and it was brilliant. I thought that was like
one of my
really
favourite
nice
moments of that was I
connected everybody again instead of like before we left.
It's nice to like, I mean,
brought everybody back to the room. I think
two examples of that, like 3 actually. Let's see if I can remember them. First one was a guy, was it young Marco, who's a big DJ. He played at like a festival, like a beach festival in the middle of July. He finished with Last Christmas by George Michael and Wham, which I think is hilarious. And then who was it? I think it was Moody Man. I think he did it in Sub Club when he played, but like a few years after Sex on Fire by Kings of Leon came out, he would play that in his sets. He was just like, I played all this house music that you are all here for, that you like whatever give me cool points for, but I love this song, we're going to play it, and I love that. The other one was like this Glasgow DJ duo, Glasgow Party Scum, who we've played with a few times, who we love. Charlotte and Joe, they're fantastic. First time I saw them DJ, like they'll play like a mix of like things like house acid, lots of Italo as well, which they're really good at. But the last song they played at one of their nights at Berkeley Suite was it was a mashup of WAP and Toxic by Britney Spears, and it was honestly one of the best things I've ever heard. So I mean, I've stolen that, and I'm sure they've accepted that'll happen.
Absolutely brilliant. So I've got a list of questions that I really want to get through with you. So I'm going to grab my phone and I'm going to jump into them with you, just because obviously the topic of the podcast is queer representation. So I just want to kind of relate it back to, I'm going to want to go back to your work in the band, I think, as well. Okay. So let me just see. Is there any specific song or performance with Declan, Welsh and the Decadent West that you feel particularly represents queer experiences or identities?
I think the most important one to mention is Do What You Want, which was a song that we had on our first album, Cheaply Bought, Expensively Sold, available now on vinyl on our Bandcamp, and also if you come see us a gig, buy one. So I think that was it's the opener of side 2, or sixth song, whatever you want to call that. But it was a song that we actually were playing as a band for about 3 years before the album came out. And that song is, I mean, the opening line is just, I heard that sexuality isn't quite as binary as my Catholic education would have me believe, and then kind of the general kind of, I guess the whole point of the song is, like, it doesn't matter. First of all, sexuality isn't something that's fixed, and also just the fact that, I guess it's quite a blatant celebration of just, it doesn't matter who you want to go home with or who you love. Like, it's just literally, the most overtly, I guess, like, out there, I guess, queer liberation song, fundamentally. And I mean, it's about me. No, I'm kidding. I don't know about that. But yeah, so like, I remember when Declan came in with the lyrics for that song, feeling very much like, here I am, I'm seen. But I think, like, again, kind of tying back to what I was saying before about, like, I think, like, generally progressive politics has to be all encompassing. And if a part of your politics isn't, I guess, queer liberation, then it's not really progressive. So like, for me, being in a band which does have that as a big part of who it is, I think, does it all really. So yeah, that would be the one song I'd mention overall. Yeah.
I think what you just said there as well, like, I think that's a question that's kind of getting thrown about in Scotland in general right now, about like progressive policies, government policies or government ministers. Do you know what I mean? Especially with people like Kate Forbes and stuff like that, that we would think that we maybe thought before was a progressive person, that now we look upon it as a different eye just with what's recently came out. You know what I mean? I think that's kind of similar what you're talking about there. But is there any moment through with the band, or any performance in particular with the band, that you have, like, with queer identifying, like as a queer identified person, like, image wise, is there any performance or music video or anything like that where you've really, like, kind of honed in yourself like that, or been really expressive as a queer person? Does your imagery come into it?
I think it does. I mean, I've always saw live performance as a way to be quite expressive in a larger than life way than you necessarily can do in everyday life. And I guess, like, I always quite enjoy that. I mean, we have, our fan base is kind of all ages, but we have a lot of younger fans as well. And I've always kind of thought, that if like seeing someone like me on stage who, might, dress more feminine sometimes, dress more masculine other times, kind of present in different ways. Like, I think that is, I guess it's a good role model for people to have. But one performance in particular, I can't really, it's quite hard to pinpoint. Glastonbury was a great one. That was definitely that. We did a King Tut show right before COVID, where we all dressed as elves, but I don't know if that's necessarily queer. That's just Christmas. But yeah, I think it's not something I kind of directly think about as, I guess. I guess present myself in a specific way. It's more just, you know, based on how I'm feeling at that point, or where I'm at, and what I kind of want to, how I want to choose to express myself in that moment.
I kind of knew what your answer was going to be there, just because obviously I've been to quite a few of your shows and stuff. I know, big fan, you know. But I've been to a few of your shows, so I like visually know how you dress and stuff like that when it comes to gigs and like how you perform. I think one of the times I came to see you in, I think it was a poetry club.
A long time ago.
It was a bit wild, so it was quite an intimate gig, but you got a bit wild, a bit sweaty, I think you even took your top off at one point, so you did.
Partially, I think I was wearing some kind of like...
I don't even think
half,
it was really a top though. Yeah,
I was wearing some kind of half top that was falling down off me. I do a lot of stuff like that. But yeah, that was like, I mean, to talk about that gig, like, I mean, that was the first gig we ever played in Glasgow where we didn't have to like get all of our pals to come. Yep. Or like convince all of our friends to do this and do that. And I think the thing with that in particular was that we started, I guess, playing in this iteration of the band maybe like 2018 with, I guess, Declan and Decadent West, and also with like the kind of, I guess, the plethora of songs that came to our first album. Kind of 2018, but we didn't really play any Glasgow shows for all of 2018 as far as I can remember. I think we might have, I can't really remember when and where we did them, but our first Glasgow show in a while was that Poetry Club in February 2019. So we'd gone a full year without actually really knowing what the demand for us in Glasgow was. So like for that to sell out so quickly was just absolutely insane. And then going from that to St Luke's in the same year, which is, I guess, 3-4 times the size, was leaps and bounds. And then COVID hit, so that made everything great.
I was just going to say that. Is that actually when that was? Because I'm thinking like it was literally the month later or something, was it?
St Luke's was the November 2019, and then
so it was just coming.
And then we went into lockdown in March 2020. So yeah, I think. COVID was an interesting one because we were actually on tour when we were doing some dates in Yorkshire. We just done a show in York, and then the next day we had a day off. We were all lying in our hotel room, just doom scrolling Twitter, watching what was happening in Italy at the time, and kind of thought
that was pretty crazy.
It was, yeah. But I remember like we weighed up. We didn't have to cancel the show, and there was like 2 more weeks of events going on, but we were like, we decided to cancel both those shows, go up the roads, because we were like, if we've even put one person at risk, like like it's not worth it.
It was just the fear as well. Like nobody knew it was happening. You know, like
exactly.
At that point we were like, I remember seeing BBC's cover and it was like people were like dropping dead in the street and all that in Italy, and I just was like, that is not actually what happened though. You know, like when it came here, like I think it was like obviously it was like a lot of fear tactics at the beginning with the media, and then we kind of realised what it actually was, you know. But I don't think they knew either. You know, there was a whole like, it was just this mysterious thing that happened to us. You know?
Yeah, there was definitely.
Hopefully, it never happen again, because it was actually horrific. As musicians, it was like the worst thing.
Oh yeah, I mean,
nice. Like, it was a nice time to get insular and get like inside your head, but I felt like, wow, I really got inside my head.
Yeah, I don't like it. I need to do as much as possible to get out of my head most of the time. So it was a terrible.
I'm still trying to dig my way out of it from that period of time. Like
we're all doing our own wee thing. But yeah, I think for musicians in that time, it was very difficult, especially if your main income was live focused. You know, I mean, we had to cancel a lot of shows. Like we did. The St Luke's show was in November 2019. We'd had an SW3 Galvanisers Yard show booked for May, and then that was meant to be May 2020. We ended up playing that gig in November 2021, so about 18 months, basically set us back 18 months live. So like it would have, I think, I mean, for a lot of bands and for a lot of artists, it really did kill momentum, and there was a lot of artists like who I guess weren't able to work through that, and like did kind of lose the whatever attention they had, or whatever, I guess, sort of creative flow they were in. And it was terrible for artists, not just in terms of income, but obviously it was devastating there, but just on a creative level, it just did a lot of things to a lot of people, definitely.
Yeah.
And I hope no one ever releases I don't know how I feel about art that references COVID, you know, art like films where people were wearing masks and all that. I don't know how I feel about it. It can be done badly and it can be done well. But yeah, I don't know.
But you know what, it was something that we all collectively went through, so we kind of need to recognise it, you know, and hopefully again it never happens again. I couldn't go through it. Somebody told me there was going to be another one in 2025 if sign me out then, you know, like I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
But so just to go back to the questions, I had wrote these down, so I just want to go into them. Do you need another wee drink or anything?
No, I think good. Okay? Yeah, I'm good.
So one of the ones I wanted to focus on was like, obviously we can have the conversation about like queer representation and queer visibility, but it doesn't just end there, you know, like that isn't the end goal, I think, like when you want to really get into it, the end goal of it isn't just about getting people visible, about getting queer people into certain jobs, that's not what it's about. There's got to be systematic change, you know what I mean? There's got to be greater change than that for it actually to work. It's got to be in like a government level where we see a total difference being made. So I just wanted to kind of ask, is there anything like, can you, how do you think like the Scottish music industry can like do more to promote or support queer musicians and artists?
I mean, I think, like as you say about systemic change, I think a lot of what can help queer people, there's a lot of things that will help queer people, but can also help everyone.
Yeah.
I think like, I mean, I think like to talk about, I guess funding of the arts in particular is something that, I mean, when you have a conservative government, you are seeing what happens when the free market being the most important thing and also the best allocation of the way to allocate resources. You're seeing that experiment in real time, whether or not it's like, you're also seeing just straight up culture wars. You're not getting to the root of any real problem. But it really is just like a lot of it comes down to funding and like making sure that people have the resources available to do what they need to do. I mean, you talk about artists and like and again, I'm probably talking generally about all artists as opposed to just queer artists, but like there used to be a time when it was a lot easier to be an artist and get state support to, I guess, essentially live on. And so you didn't have to worry as much about, you know, working or being, I guess, like taking up all your time being distracted in a way that I think it's what it's meant now is that it's become more and more common to be an artist. You have to kind of have a certain degree of independent wealth or you have to have art which is, you know, a product which is very marketable and you need to be like so on the ball with, you know, with I guess the business side of things, and like business and art aren't the same thing. Like I don't think business creates good art necessarily, unless, you know, I mean, there's a million ways. Like there's some amazing pop music which is like come out of a completely commercialized creative structure. But yeah, in terms of like, I guess what can be done for queer people is just, I think,
quite a hard question, isn't it?
It's a hard question. I mean, it's quite hard to talk about it specifically with music because, you know, if you talk about like, you know, get more funding of healthcare for trans people is a massive part of like just, I guess, more for everyone. Like that has its benefits, and for trans people in particular it does. But yeah, in terms of artists, I think just making sure that funding is being given to the right people and going to the right places and letting people know that there's loads of support out there is important as well, as much as possible, because Creative Scotland is, you know, it's there, it's available, but a lot of the times funding
being depleted of cash though, you know.
This is true, and it's also it can also be it can be quite intimidating filling out a funding application, but also like not realizing that what you're wanting to do is something that you actually could apply for funding for. So I think that is also a big factor.
I've never done a Creative Scotland funding like application yet, but I've been told it is enormous.
It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time, but you're kind of it's like any other kind of funding thing. Like, you know, you can kind of know what they're looking for and kind of.
But I think that also is an issue within itself, that people need to recognise that like some people are really, really super creative and maybe on the as academic or they maybe struggle with the writing side of things. So having application forms that are absolutely enormous, that really like ask you really in-depth questions about where the finances are going to go, or that obviously they need to know these things, right, before they'll award you the money or whatever. But I think even that alone needs to be made more available to people, that systematically, that's the change that needs to happen. Everything, it's not just about like getting more people in visible positions, like queer people in visible positions. It's about changing every aspect to everything. But where do you even begin with that? That's the thing. We can ask
Big
for these
questions.
changes, but where do we actually begin with it? Because does anybody know? I think we just need to make small steps. I guess just getting people in positions is the first start. I
guess it depends kind of what your actual end goal is. It's like, do you want, as you say, more representation of queer people in the arts, or do you want, I guess, like a wider sense of acceptance of queer people in society? Because although obviously massive steps and bounds have been made in recent years, it still is hard for very big sections of the queer community to get acceptance for various different reasons. And I think that's kind of, visibility can be helpful and awareness can be helpful, but it doesn't solve a lot of those problems. So I think it is about everything together.
And I think there'll be people watching this thinking like, what it's typical that there's two white guys talking about visibility, like that are maybe semi-masked, identifying, it's there's a question within that. Are we the right people to be having that conversation?
Totally.
But I think recognising that is first and foremost. Doing this podcast is like, for me, in a personal level, is really all about educating myself. But I want to give other people a platform that, whereas I'm afforded maybe a different privilege that I don't recognise first and foremost, because it's not something that we're really that aware of, is really the basis of why I want to do this. I think a couple of guests that are going to come on, I think it will be important that we put the question out so people are watching that as other people coming on, it's not just two white guys that's going to be speaking each week. But to move on to the questions again, because there was another one I wanted to speak about. Is there any times in like Declan, Welsh and the Decadent West that you have, like, obviously the scene that's in is like a kind of indie scene, and that is again dominated by like white males, usually heterosexual as well, Is there any moments within that kind of performance side of things or anything like that where you felt safer or unsafe in them? There's one in particular I wonder if you'll bring up, but I'll let you speak yourself.
Well, I don't know what that would be. I've never really had many issues with feeling unsafe in Glasgow in particular.
I think Glasgow's a different place altogether,
Yeah, I think it's very.
What about touring? Is there any times when you've been touring that you've maybe felt?
Not overly, to be honest. I feel like it's kind of, I mean, maybe I don't know. Maybe I have the benefit of being surrounded by a touring party and kind of being, separate from other people. But I don't know. Maybe no. I generally feel quite, quite good and quite safe all around.
So the one I wanted to touch on, I was just wondering if you'd bring it up. We had spoke about it before you went and done it, and it was you'd done a gig in Russia, and I remember you telling me just before you were gone, like just the kind of questions that was getting brought up around about it regarding safety and stuff like that. Just because obviously Russia isn't maybe as progressive as Glasgow,
Yeah.
So was that a time that you ever felt uncomfortable there, or did you feel safe when you went to Russia?
Yeah, I guess it's not something we really talk about very much, to be honest. Not from the point of view of it being necessarily that bad, because like everyone I met musically over there was fine, but I think it's probably just a bit, I don't know. We had a sort of conflicted, it was a conflicted experience, basically, as you can imagine, and it's probably even more so now, obviously. So yeah, it's definitely not something we really acknowledge. But I mean, privately, it's...
Was there queer people at the gig? Like visibly queer people?
Good question. You know, obviously, I never really want to like necessarily make assumptions based on how people look necessarily, but I would have said, yeah, there was definitely like a few people. I mean, there was people that we...
interesting to hear, you know.
Well, there was people that we... I remember there was a couple of fans actually, who... Maybe I'm not sure if they'd heard of us before we went over there, or if they'd kind of found out we were playing, and then I guess they then became fans. But they very much were like massive fans of ours, and I think I don't. It's hard to say, because I say I don't want to judge necessarily, but it definitely felt like. Because we were playing in Eastern Russia. I think it's worth mentioning. It was in Vladivostok, which is like, for context, about an hour's flight from the North Korean border, or 2 hours. So it's really, really far east. And in many ways, it kind of, the impression that we got from speaking to people when we were over there was that it's almost in many ways its own separate, I guess, place. It's a very big, it's like almost like quite a touristy place for like people in the Far East as well. But yeah, it kind of, you know, you don't really know how much. It was hard to say how much the younger people, especially we met there, identified with Russia, or kind of what the West sees of Russia.
I think it's important to be add that, like, I wouldn't be generalising Russian people as hating queer people. You know, that's not what I'm trying to say or anything like that. But just from what we see in the media, what our basic understanding of like the way the government works in Russia. I just was wondering to topic in that kind of topic. Was that a scary point for you? That's all.
I think so. I think take the queer thing out of the occasion. Like four guys from Scotland going to Russia has its own kind of fears. But I guess I don't know. It was kind of. I think it was something. I kind of, I guess, turned over my head quite a lot before we went, and it was definitely something we had to consider safety more, and kind of, you know, how visibly queer I was being generally. But it never really felt like, I mean, I don't know, it had its kind of scary parts, but I didn't really think about it too much. Well, I did think about it a lot, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it was quite brave though. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because I thought it was quite a brave thing for you to go and do, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of people in your position would maybe chose not to go, you know. But I think it's important that, like, we don't generalise, we don't think in that way that probably the media want us to think about Russia, because Russian people are probably absolutely fine. You know, you can't generalise like that. There's probably lots of queer people in Russia that identify with the band, with yourself, you know, so it's one of them, you know. I just thought it's quite an important thing to highlight. So for another question, I just was thinking, how do you think music venues and festivals can create a more inclusive environment for queer performers and fans? I think Glasgow does quite well for that.
Glasgow does a good job. Again,
gender neutral toilets, things like that, like just small things that people really like, that really helps, you know.
I think, like, kind of going back to the conversation we had earlier about Bonjour and having that kind of like the amount of people that they book, which are, you know, from like underrepresented communities. I think that representation on a bill like does have an impact. People seeing people like themselves on these bills does matter. In terms of, I guess in terms of like things like I think things like safe or safer space policies are quite helpful, and like and then having, I guess, security and staff that are well versed in those as well, that will take that kind of thing seriously. It's quite hard, I think, in like, you know, venues where people are drinking, or venues where, you know, there might be, I guess, like drug taking going on as well. It can be quite hard to create like a completely safe space, but I think having those policies and having people working there that care about them, that are implementing them well, is quite helpful, I think. Yep.
There's a few nights across Glasgow I've been to that like have been curated by people like Bonsai Bonner and stuff like that. They are really, really good at creating a night that feels totally safe in every aspect of it, you know. Like, I think that's quite important. But yeah, I think like but that's places like maybe Poetry Club and the Berkeley Suite and stuff like that. They're quite good at it as well.
Berkeley Suite's great. I think that is my favourite club in Glasgow, is Berkeley Suite.
Yeah, see, as soon as they put see, the thing is, every time I go there, I know what it's like with the lights on, because I've been to like 30th birthdays and stuff in it, right? I know it's so odd going back there after you've spent like the night two-stepping in it, but see, as soon as they put the fog machines on, the place looks enormous.
Yeah,
like it feels as if it takes like 10-20 minutes to walk from one side of the dance floor to the other.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But see, when the lights are on, it's tiny.
Well, I think they changed all the lights and the sound system quite recently as well, so it is just like a whole, and they've redone the interior as well, so it almost does feel like a different place.
Yeah.
God, Glenfiddich is just great. That is one of my favourites.
I remember the first time I went and they'd like the streamers, like I remember like these streamers hanging for the ceiling. I can't remember what the night was. I don't know if it was like Shoot Your Shot or something, but they had something hanging for it, and I just thought, this is hilarious. It was like very disco vibes, you know what I mean?
It's that kind of place for sure.
Yeah. So, another question, how do you balance your work as a musician and a DJ and promoting queer representation in the music industry? How do you engage with that? Do you feel like you represent your community? That's quite a deep question. So
it's a deep question. Yeah, I mean, I think more so with DJing, I think it's very much like, I think it is just, you know, I mean, the personal is political, and I guess that's like, as you say, like, or as we said, kind of being visibly queer does have its benefits, but also just, you know, recognising, as we've kind of said, you know, I don't represent the whole queer community. Like, I can't speak for everyone, so also, as you say, you know, educating yourself is important as well. But I don't really know.
And obviously, like, queer history, like it's an educational thing as well. You know, like even just listening to the music, like you're being educated in a way that you maybe don't really understand you know, because of the way the music runs. So you should definitely go and see their nights if you haven't been, because they are really good. Another part I was wanting to speak about was just 2 seconds to try and find that. So just when we're kind of coming up to the end here, so I'll cut this bit out because I'm trying to think, you know what I mean?
Cut.
So I had 25 questions, but we're never going to get through them all.
That's a lot of questions. That is a lot of questions.
I just wanted to be prepared.
Just in case.
I wanted to really, really scratch.
Because you might jump around, one will lead to the other. Like it's almost like a choose your own adventure.
Another a wee segue that I had to, obviously you mentioned Talia. I was I was really trying to get the dolls, obviously to do the podcast, the Dolls Discuss.
Trying
to get the two of them to come on. I've messaged them to see if they'll come on, because I think they're two really good people that would be good for it, you know. Quite two kind of figureheads within the queer scene in Glasgow, you know. So how do you use music to create a sense of community and connection among queer people in Scotland? So I'll jump on this first. So for me, like my roots as a musician is like I started doing like more traditional music and stuff, like it was more Celtic based music, and for me now, as I went away for that, I trained in different sides of music. I trained in jazz and stuff, and then went into rock and pop and get the Celtic kind of trained out of me. So now I'm making my way, it's like I've done a full circle, I'm making my way back for a release that I'm going to be doing probably further in the year, but I'm trying to kind of bring more of a queer perspective into traditional and folk music within Scotland. I think there's another guy that is doing it. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's actually made like a performance where it's like there's quite a few queer artists that like work in the traditional music scene. So for me, I'm kind of moving back to that space. But is there any for you? Is it in the music that you make or the music that you play? Is there anything relates there to you?
I guess.
And the band, is there anything like what is your input to the band? Like what?
Well, I mean,
do you do any of the songwriting or?
Yeah, so it's pretty collaborative. I mean, like, so Declan is like the main songwriter of our band, so he will write like kind of lyrics, chords, and usually come to us with like some, I guess, the skeleton and vocals of a song, and then
a character and a half.
The rest of us are then all kind of like adding our own little bits here and there, giving our advice and suggestions and whatever. So it is collaborative with the main songwriter. I don't know, I guess if we're talking about queer representation in music, I always wanted to do the gayest guitar solo possible, but I don't really know what that means. To be honest with you, I've no idea.
Yeah.
To be honest,
I don't know what that would mean either.
Yeah,
but I've seen performances I've seen for you. You really, really put it out there.
Yeah,
like I think that one particular in the Poetry Club always comes back to me. I've seen you like play lots and lots of venues now. Like pure super fangirl in the corner, you know what I mean? But like, yeah, I've seen you play lots of different places. Like, and I think I don't know if it's the intimacy of the Poetry Club, and
definitely.
Obviously you were saying that had been the first time you had played in a while, so it felt really intimate, and I really felt like you went for it. So I did.
Maybe I don't go for it. I don't get in the crowd as much as I used to.
Yeah, you were in the crowd.
I was in the crowd. I remember that. I used to go like lie on the floor in the middle of the gig and that, and maybe I should get back into that. I bought a new guitar, which is really nice, and I don't want to get that. I don't want to get it scratched, so maybe I'm just a bit too careful these days. I don't know. Yeah. No, I mean, I think because guitar music is, as you say, it's generally quite a straight environment. Although, I mean, again, I don't want to assume anyone's sexuality, because sometimes you don't know. But yeah, it is like, I think quite an important thing for me to do is to have, a queer outlet within that.
Yeah.
Traditionally non-queer space.
Yeah, as traditionally a non-queer space, like I've been in multiple bands, and I don't think I've ever come across somebody who's queer identifying as the lead guitarist of a band. Like, I don't think I've came across that before.
I'll take it.
So it's quite good. Do you know what I mean? that's what we're looking for, though. We need more people in different positions like that. And like, if you don't know as well, Duncan is a really, really good guitarist. Really, really good.
I'm alright.
Yeah. Like 20 fingers, mate. Like, it was wild. Like, yeah, really, really good. But so obviously now you're in a position, you have been in the band for a while, you've been doing obviously queer history for a long time now, and like a good few years. You're in a position now where you're probably more what we could probably class as a figurehead within the community, the local community anyway, as a gay man,
It's pressure.
Man, but no, I don't feel pressure by it. It's just something that's happened, like you've worked to get to where you are. Yeah. So you deserve a wee bit of recognition about that, So do you feel like that comes with any sense of responsibility as a queer person? Like, do you feel like you're responsible as putting out, obviously we have touched on this, like there's certain aspects of your performance where you want to be visible, but in every aspect of your professional life, do you feel like you have a responsibility now as a kind of, I wouldn't say a gatekeeper, but like a person that is like recognised?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is important to use your platform responsibly. I think that's something that way too many people don't recognise. It's a very, podcast, it's a very, very toxic trait of like so many of them, where it's like, we'll just have, let's just have a free speech discussion. Everyone's just talking about things, and like their response to that is to say, let's get the most like reactionary, offensive person on this podcast, because it means that, they'll say something controversial, which would be a 15-second clip on social media, which means we'll get loads of traction. That's an example of an irresponsible use of your platform, and I mean, it's a million miles away from anything even getting close to, but like, I think that is one thing to be mindful of, is in general as platform and how you use that. I guess I think it's a good thing that I'm someone who's like visibly queer in this in like the traditionally straight dominated sphere that I'm in, and there has been like, we've had fans come up to us after gigs, like who've kind of been very much like, especially like mentioned songs like Do What You Want and kind of like the queer aspect of things, and said, this has been quite helpful for me, or it's good to see a band saying these things, because like, it can be quite hard sometimes it can be hard for artists to, I guess sometimes it's hard to be very outspoken in music, because it can have its downsides.
Yeah.
But that's because music is a business, and commercialization doesn't care about anything but branding.
I think that's a whole other conversation, though.
I know, but I keep coming back to it, so that's all I want to talk about.
It was just like hate capitalism, mate. That's it. We need to just move away from
Soundbite it.
Yeah. So I think we just need to do like maybe to kind of round up, because we're kind of running out of time now. Just a wee bit of housekeeping, and just speak about where people can find you. where people can find like queer history of dance music. Is there any up and coming projects that you have that you'd like to speak about?
I mean, in terms of, when do you know when will this be going out then? What should I be promoting for?
It will probably be released next week.
Okay, next week. Oh, great. So we have a big show in Edinburgh at La Belle Angel, which I'm going to take a look at and get the exact date for. You can edit out the part where I was looking for it. On the 22nd, Saturday the 22nd of April, we're doing a big show in Edinburgh at La Belle Angel. That's with the band, not with Queer History. We've got November tour, a November UK tour, Scottish date, Aberdeen announced for that. We're also doing Transmit in July, playing the main stage, which is exciting. Queer History of Dance Music, we are playing at Melting Pot and Heatherly's event at Queen's Park Bandstand. Queen's Park Recreational Ground, and that is on the 6th of May. So relatively busy spring and summer for festivals and gigs and all that. So yeah.
Amazing.
And if you want to find the band, we're on all the usual platforms: Declan, Welsh, Decadent West, Spotify, Instagram, all that. And Queer History of Dance Music is on Instagram and SoundCloud, and you can find all the other stuff there.
Yeah, perfect. So just want to thank you for coming on the podcast, being the first guest of it. You know. So yeah, if you're listening in, then obviously you can find us on like all your major streaming platforms for podcasts, like Spotify podcasts and Apple Podcasts, and it'll also be aired out on YouTube as well.
Nice.
As long as you're happy with that.
I'll
send you it before we release it, so you can.
I'm not vain. It's fine.
Yeah, that's when you can tick the educational purposes only.
We'll see.
But anyway, thanks for listening in, and that has been the first episode of Beyond the Binary Beats.